Welcome to how Shell and AWS collaborated to create the Subsurface data universe. For those that are in the energy industry today, you might know this as the OSDU Data Platform. I'm Kim Padaletti, Head of Energy Data Platforms at Amazon Web Services. I'm joined today with special guest Gabriel Guerra, the Vice President of Digital Ventures at Shell. Today, Gabriel and I are going to take you on an epic journey, sharing 3 stories about how Shell solved for their technology challenges and continues to reinvent itself today. March 3rd, 2006, in Seattle, Washington, Amazon Web Services was founded and commercialized as an experiment. We wanted to see if the way that we solved for our internal developer challenges could be democratized and commercialized to users. In our first story today, we're going to share a similar story about how Shell set out to solve for their technology challenges and fundamentally changed the way that the energy industry looks at cloud, data, and data platforms. So, Gabriel, what is the Shell Data Universe and why did you create it?
Thank you, Kim. I'll start first with the why. About 5 years ago, a small group of explorers like me got given the opportunity to go out and change our day jobs to how can we use digital to change the way we work. And at that time, we decided that we were going to go after 3 pillars in our program. We were going to look at how digital technologies could change our workflows, and the workflows are a key cornerstone in how we think about the solution here. How we're going to think about our data and what our data have to change because of those workflows are going to change. And a third pillar that we didn't really know what it meant at the time is what new business models we're going to derive from this new way of working. So before I go any further, I need to, for those of you on the audience that are not familiar with exploration or the oil business, our workflows today are not that different than what we used to do 60, 70 years ago. We used to use paper and color pencils. Today we use a lot of high-density data and high computing. But the logical steps that we take to derive to answers we need to derive are very, very similar. So we felt like we were ripe for disruption by bringing machine learning and different ways of thinking, different ways of addressing our data going forward. So it wasn't difficult for us to imagine how workflows could change and what parts of workflow are more ripe or not to change. The question was, is this ever going to stick? Are we going to be able to do it? Or can we even get a value out of it if my data is a mess? Or if I cannot deploy all my data everywhere? So the reality was that even if I derived some great machine learning interesting way to change one of the steps in my workflow, am I going to get the payback from this if I can deploy on all the data sets I have, for example? Or if I cannot learn from data sets in one base and bring to the other because those databases don't talk to each other, or if I don't even have access to the data. So very quickly, we stopped the work on reimagining the workflows and realized this is not going to be difficult to try, but we're never really going to pay off if we don't address the data at the same time. So we spent some time thinking about what we're going to do with our data then. What do we have to do? We need to have a way to bring all of our data into one place. We need it accessible to everybody. We want to have it in a place where data is not really beholden to an application so everybody can read it. We can bring it into different things we are trialing at the same time. So this idea that we need to create a massive data lake where all our data is going to go in kind of emerged as the key enabler for anything else we were going to do. So initially we called it the Shell Data Universe. Nowadays we call it the Subsurface Data Universe because Shell was a bit too big for us to handle at that time. We didn't really know what it meant, what's it really going to look like in reality. But at that point we came up with a name. We said, okay, great. We're going to create this thing, this entity that's going to house all of our data and enable us to do these amazing things. And from now on, everything we do has to be focused on feeding data from, to, and using these things. So at that point, we created SDU as a vision. And from that point onwards, that's the journey we got on.
Excellent. Wow, well, obviously you've been on quite a journey with SDU. Can you share also the real story, the battle scars? Tell us about the challenges or some of the lessons learned that you faced on that journey.
Quite a few. So I'll start with some early ones first. So the first thing we did then is how do we make this reality? And I think the biggest lesson we learned there is go find a partner that has the landscape, the space, the technology, but also the will to go on something new with you, right? So we took our team to the West Coast, went and visited a whole bunch of companies, ended up spending a couple of days with AWS, and that's where AWS became our key partner in enabling kind of our journey on SDU. They also didn't know what it meant at the time, right? But then we built that together, with that. And a part of that, kind of find your key partners, is not just the partner itself that's going to work with you because they have what you need, but it was also the ecosystem that AWS brought to us. 47.9 is sitting here in the audience. It was another partner that became a key enabler when I was the story on. It came because of the partnership with AWS, right? So it's find the partners that have the scale, the breadth, but also the will to innovate with you, key in everything we do. And that lesson stayed with everything else my team did since, right? Go find the right partner for the projects. A second thing I'd say, and that's maybe the humbling part, was a whole bunch of geoscientists with some IT specialists from Shell, and we have this vision of SDU. Every day, we got told how we were thinking about something wrong. So this humility to accept that in that journey, we had to learn something new every day and change and pivot. And it was nice to have the North Star, but it was the flexibility to continue to experiment the technology, realize that the technology wasn't doing what we wanted, or we needed to ask a different question going forward. So this flexibility to continue to accept that you don't know what you don't know and learn through it, it was been key. And then to the point that we had to move people in the team that had more of an attitude towards what we're trying to do. And I think the last thing from these early days that I'll leave it as a general thing, in a large company like ours, everything's about procedures and policies and ways to do things. And the first thing you confront yourself with is, one is you have this vision, you find people that can enable in that vision, and then everybody else in the company is telling you why you can't do that. That doesn't work. Our policies don't allow that. Well, policies are written by men, we can go rewrite them, right? So the key thing there was you need to have your leadership aligned all the way through it, right? So we had quite a few senior people that wanted to see it happen. It didn't mean it was necessarily much easier, but we got through on changing policy, changing attitude, changing things that wouldn't allow us to do it otherwise. So if you're trying to move a conservative company like ours to something very new without having everybody aligned that this is what you want to do, it would be much harder. Right? So it was a thing. If I fast forward now 5 years, and we're still working on SDU today. We have a bigger team than we had in the beginning. We have OSDU running in parallel. And I think the lessons these days are being of a different nature, right? So building the data platform to do what the vision kind of set out to do. It's still ongoing, but it's there. We know it's going to happen. And now we're dealing with the fact of now we have to migrate everybody into it. And preparing, getting assets that are actively working today to also take the time and the energy and get everything ready. So, it's not just fine to go and build a data platform. You have to get your customer aligned that this is value for them, because if not, you're not going to migrate anybody on. And I'll leave you with the last one. That's maybe a bit more specific. So it's not just the willingness to bring the data on and get your customers aligned that this is going to be better for them. If their workflow is not changing at the same time, what isn't it for them? So the journey that we've been on with OSDU up to now has been one of a lot of internal push and energy and money and commitment of people and the best brains to do it. But if you don't bring the workflows and the customer to realize that this is going to make their life better, or the user experience is going to improve, the results are going to be better, and the workflow doesn't really change, or there's no appeal to them, it becomes meaningless in the eye of the customer, right? And because it took a lot of energy, we devoted a lot of energy to the build, we're still getting up on speed and we're getting everybody on board that this is actually better for them. So think about your customers very, very early on is the lesson that we learn, continue to learn every day, then we've been to bring them along more than anybody else.
Excellent. All right, fast forward to 2018. Obviously, love the story on SDU. Those in the audience and maybe online might be wondering, wow, Shell spent a lot of time, energy, and effort on SDU. And ultimately, with OSDU, Shell chose to open source SDU, hence becoming OSDU as it's known today. A lot of people would be thinking that SDU was a competitive advantage. Why did you open source it?
Great question. The idea started very early. So I think we were after the first planning increment, right, but 3-4 months in, we kind of realized that, it's going to be hard, but this is going to work. We're going to be able to build this. This is going to get somewhere. But then we started thinking about the size of the enterprise ahead of us. How much is it going to cost? How long is it going to take? And we started fearing a bit like, well, if I end up with this working one day, but I'm the only one that has it, how is everybody else going to interact with this? Am I going to have to go out there and tell every partner, vendor, client we use with, they say, oh, but to work with me, it has to be slightly different. The architecture is a different one. Am I going to carry the cost of making everybody else adapt to my way of doing it? So we started toying with the idea of how do we bring a much bigger ecosystem on board with us, right? To make sure that the SDU vision continue to be sustainable. It was something that is going to live through. In a way, we were thinking about, what if I built this amazing thing and I want to be the Blu-ray, I don't want to be the HD DVD that's going to die and then nobody else cares about it anymore, right? So we were worrying about how does this become sustainable. And then I think, but the first time that we brought it up internally that maybe we should give it away as a way to make everybody use, how do I say this politely? Shell didn't like that idea at all. How much money did you spend? You're going to give it away for free to everybody? Why? And I think what broke that cycle and allowed us to do it was when we convinced everybody else that we don't outcompete our peers on my data platform. We will all compete on the quality of the brains we employed and how we train them. We all compete them on how fast we do things and what we do with the data we have. But the data platform is not going to make us better than anybody else and potentially cost a lot more if we're going to have to do this on our own. So why don't we put it out there and get everybody to collaborate on the things that we don't compete on and allow then us to go spend our money, maybe less money on the non-competitive parts, but spend more of our best brains on the things that are competitive to us. It was a bit of a journey, and I must say that I think at the end, when we put it out there, we still had the worry of, is this going to work? Is anyone going to be interested in this, right? Are we just doing this own thing on our own, and nobody sees in the vision? And it was a huge amount of validation for us when we decided to open source this. We went out there, and quickly the forum grew from a few early adopters to a lot of people, right? Today we have, 240 companies or so.
That's right. Yeah. Amazing. Well, and thank you. I want to take a moment to say thank you to Shell for taking that really bold step and donating this, because not only did it help the other operators in the industry align to a common standard and data platform, it really stimulated an ecosystem of application providers, small to medium ones, as well as unique startup companies to build on this data platform. Not only did it help to stimulate and lower the barrier of entry for these software companies, but it increased an ecosystem of innovation and technology. Now, this wouldn't be reInvent if we didn't have an architecture diagram and spoke a little bit about technology and innovation. So, Gabriel, question for you. Where do you see the OSDU Data Platform going next in terms of technology and innovation? So when we toyed with the idea of open sourcing and got the validation when everybody joined, I think the ulterior motive that always attracted us even more to that idea is this, the idea that we lower the entry barriers to an industry that's being blocked by a few big providers for a long time. So what OSDU enables is this idea that, for someone that now in a much smaller scale than a big vendor wants to create something new or bring something to the market, you can enable a marketplace on top of OSDU that, it will be different than anything else we had before. Right. So let me do a parenthesis on why. So I strongly believe that the era of the monolith applications that allow us to deploy our workflows is gone. We need to go to the future where we look for the best technology for each step of the workflow and allow the analysts to decide which steps of the workflow they want to use and how. Not be beholden to what someone thought was a good idea and that becomes the way you do it. So that only works if you, of course, have an architecture that allows you to do that, which is what we started with OSDU in a way. But also, it now allows others to think about, I don't have to solve the whole workflow to have a product to put out there. I can actually work on that niche. I don't have to be big, right? And I can be the best part of that one step of the workflow. We all win, right? Someone now has a new business, and we get to do things better, right? So the idea that one of the tenets of everything we do today has always been that all great ideas are not invented here, right? So let's look out in the market and assume that a lot of bright minds out there doing a lot of great stuff. How do we get them to feel that they can come and create here without a massive barrier to kind of enter into the market? So I honestly believe that if we continue to be where we're going with OSDU to date, we should create a marketplace for solutions that are of a different granularity, but potentially much higher quality. Excellent. All right. At Amazon Web Services, as you've heard this week, we're unusually customer obsessed. 90% of what we build are direct requests from our customers, and the other 10% are inventions on behalf of our customers. What you're seeing here on the right-hand side is a combination of both. We've heard a lot of feedback from our customers about how they want to accommodate additional dynamic data types, such as real-time data. They would like a faster ingestion. And so we've started to optimize a lightweight energy data platform to give you more flexibility and move faster than all the traditional ones that you might have had in the past. We've been building this out with a lot of our application providers, our SI partners, and others. So thanks for everyone who's been on the journey to help develop more of a lightweight energy data platform. And that's our new architectural announcement. So, Gabriel, obviously we've talked a little bit about SDU. You've pioneered OSDU. And then that wasn't enough. You didn't stop there. You continued on to pioneer a radically new approach to look for energy sources. Can you tell us what is Studio X?
So when we set out to do, remember those 3 pillars I talked about, that we're going to disrupt the workflows. The workflows continue to be the identity of everything we do. Data became OSDU, SDU first and OSDU later. And then we had this thing about new business models, what that meant. I think open sourcing SDU was our first foray into dealing with a different way of doing, bringing technology to the market or doing something different with it. But we kept with that itch of, there's more here that has to be done. How can we do it differently? And I think inspiration came from several sources, but one that is an obvious one is when we started working in earnest with AWS and then realized the power of the size of the ecosystem that came with it in terms of how we could pull, brains, technology, ideas into what we're trying to do to test things out. We kept thinking about, what if we do that for the work we do every day? Not just for the technology development. What if we did something like that for doing the work that we have to do to get to deliver the products, the oil that we need to find? So we partnered with a few people. We went around and asked a lot of questions. At some point we said, we need to create, and Studio X has a very jokey name in the beginning. We had a joke that said, we're going to create the Airbnb of geoscience. We call it AirGNG. And then, so Studio X came from this idea of the gig economy is a thing. It's out there. It's thriving. And why don't we embark in it? Right? Why do we don't go source new ideas and new, or a different workforce or different brains, and engage the bigger brain out there without having to do the work ourselves? So Studio X, for those of you that don't know, it's a very small company. It's wholly owned by Shell, but sits outside of Shell, so it can be very dependent, does things in a very different way. Sits in Austin. It has 3 different arms. There's one arm that looks at putting challenges that involve geoscience and data science and rewarding people for solutions. There's one arm that looks at doing projects like we do internally, but engaging a community of 5,000 people that don't work for us. And most of the time we get cheaper and higher quality work than we would get otherwise. And also a small startup incubator where we're looking at who are the people that are coming out with new ideas that want to actually make a product out of them or make a company out of them. Can we help them? And I don't need to own it. I just want to make sure that they succeed. So it's been a fascinating story to date of taking those lessons that we had from starting with SDU 5 years ago and kind of trying to do things in a different way and trying to push us to do even more in a different way. Again, it's pretty unique. We haven't found one that looks the same in the market yet. And we've been growing a lot in the last 2 years of operation. We started with 5 people. We have 30 sitting in Austin doing more and more and more work. It's been fascinating.
Excellent. All right, for those in the audience or maybe listening in online, they might be thinking, gosh, Studio X sounds great, but I might not be as big or have the resources that Shell has access to form a Studio X of my own. What advice would you give to them to start to solve problems today?
I think all it really takes is a will. There are enormous variety of forms to kind of go and solve problems in different ways. It doesn't have to be something like this. You don't have to create a new company. I think the biggest advice I'd have is make sure that you have your company, your leadership, your culture aligned, that's the way you want to work, and go out and find the right partner.
Right.
And the partner can be in many forms. It can be a platform that already exists. They can take some of the things you want to do. It can be someone that is willing to create something with you. I can guarantee you that on this journey, cost was never really a massive blocker, because these things end up to being cheaper than you think they are. But the hard part is getting everybody else aligned to do it with you. So I think if you think about the way we built Studio X very quickly, actually. Once we had the idea and we had everybody internally aligned that this is something we want to do, we want to try this, and then it's going to be a departure from what we do every day, but leadership accepts that this is what we want to do. We had already built SDU to a certain extent, it was a lot harder. This was much easier, right? We already had the partnerships existed. So Studio X runs completely on AWS. Most of the services straight out of the box. We could stand it up in months, right? So I think it's more the willingness, the clarity of purpose of what you want to achieve and having everybody aligned and having the right partner with you. It's not necessarily a big blocker to how you're going to do it.
Excellent. All right. Well, we're getting closer to inviting the audience up for questions. I think we're going to prepare microphones in a moment. While we're getting ready for questions, I'd like to give you one more challenge, not a question this time, but obviously you're a true builder. You've pioneered and you've built SDU, OSDU, and of course we heard the story about Studio X. We have some of the best builders in the world in the audience and listening online today. What challenge can you throw out to them to solve next?
So I'll say something slightly different. So we talked about going into this era where small solutions for small key parts of the workflows is key, and having what you call it the best in breed, right? So can we get the best solutions for part of the workflow? I think we should go to the next step. What we see around a lot is the people that have this itch to build and create the new are the ones that are likely to then take that and go from not just the technology that you built, but go build a new business. Go make the pie bigger than it is today. Don't go after a slice of the pie. Go make the pie bigger. So I think the challenge I put out there is if you are a builder or if you be in this space or if you have that kind of the drive to build more, don't just think about the technology you're going to build or what friction you're trying to address or the little part you want to make a product of. Think a bit further. Think about, can this be a new business? Could this deliver value to you, to society in a different way? And I think the more we think about this internally, the more think about that, sometimes we miss on reward because we're just so stuck on we got to use the technology to enable us to do what we always did. Do you really have to? Are there other ways to doing it? I think the energy transition is coming around and changing, at least disrupting our industry. And I see a massive amount of opportunity there to get builders that build technology today, but enable them to build businesses.
Excellent. And with that, we're going to open the opportunity to ask questions. So, a moment for that.
Hello. Is that on? Yeah. My name is Sasha. I work for Exeter. We actually also customers or vendors for Shell, but more on the trading side. What I'd like to understand is OSDU more just for spatial data, or could we also connect like commercial data, trading applications and stuff?
You want to go?
Sure. Of course, it started in the subsurface, as we know, but it has since expanded to do more for market intelligence. We've actually got one partner that's leading in that space. I think I saw S&P Global. They've done a lot with market intelligence. They've led a lot with their enterprise data management, EDM, SaaS, with OSDU integration. So we're seeing more and more of that, as I showed earlier, with the kind of core services in the energy data catalog and a lightweight data platform. We're able to accommodate additional data types that aren't just the traditional ones that rely on domain-specific data management services. So we've got some, two-way doors and flexibility, as you've heard this week at our conference, to accommodate additional data types. So would love to talk more about the marketing and trading intelligence bit, especially as it relates to field intelligence and what you're doing on trading of gas or oil or
Remember, we started with
energy.
Shell Data Universe, and then we made a Subsurface because it was closer to us. But it was always the idea that we would go beyond.
Right.
So then why not?
Great. I'm curious, could you share maybe an example or a story of how Shell benefits from a vendor, like an oilfield services company or something, adopting the OSDU platform? Like what's a benefit? If you have a OS that's using it and using the same standards, like what's a tangible benefit that comes out of that for you? Thanks.
So many examples. So in the most simplest form, a lot of the specialized workflows we have on the technical side depend on, at some point, if not the whole thing, on applications that are third party. And traditionally, most of those applications create data formats that are unique because they're optimized, they are specialized for that, for time or for a certain quality of the data we're using. So we, doing the work on the front line, usually spend oodles amount of time on data I/O, conversions, lose fidelity, sometimes introduce unwanted risk on data conversions and modifications as we work during the workflow. So part of the reason we want OSDU to be out there for everybody to use is that the data transformation become no longer an issue. So we could have data in standardized formats that are generic for everybody else, where then our job on performing the work does not involve this constant worry and effort into maintaining fidelity in the data and having to convert it for different formats and everything else. And that's been the nature of the work forever, right? So it would be a real change, but it can never happen if we did it, because then the transformation still stay on our side.
Great. So like if there's a completions vendor, for example, when they hand, and they're on the same standard, when they hand the well over to you for operation, like do you start from like day one with all of the history of the well, et cetera, from their perspective?
Yes. So then depending on who's working with the data internally, sometimes you start from scratch more than once. Right? Depending who's doing the work and what they're going to use the data for. So it's not uncommon that you see more than once we start from scratch. So that's the idea that what if we didn't have to do that? By the time the data came in, it is ready for anything else you do with it.
That's great. Thanks.
I think even as a follow-up to that, not only does it help the oilfield services company in that regard, but for the operators' joint venture sharing. So when they get that well, it's already aligned to the format, and then you can seamlessly share it between one operator and a joint venture partner and another. So for example, we've got a public case study about Shell and the Libra joint venture with Petrobras and how they were able to seamlessly share a well in the same format and just streamline that workflow. So it definitely benefits the OFS side too.
Hi, how does PPDM fit in with OSDU?
So in the beginning, it didn't. And I think these days, they are now part of the forum, they are working together. So the idea is PPDM and all the effort that's been in that space should become one and the same. My vision always has been that would be part of how we do it going forward, right? So if this is a standard you're going to adopt, why not put it in there? So I think we're not there yet. I don't know if you know more about that.
So PPDM is a member of the OSDU Forum. And what I have observed over the past couple of years is that more and more the OSDU Data Platform is becoming the de facto data standard for energy. You've seen this with the acquisition of Energistics by the Open Group. Obviously, PPM has been very active in the forum as a member. So it makes sense to gravitate towards that, just also lowers the barrier of entry and aligns those application providers and software vendors to align on that standard and build on the common format so that it saves them time and money and effort as well.
So we would like to see a seamless integration. That would be the right future for me.
Perfect. Thanks.
No problem.
Hi. So it's energy transition time, and you've got 240 members on your forum. Can you speak a little bit about how OSDU is going to differentiate in that energy journey and some maybe examples of things that are happening right now that are promising or exciting?
Oh, great question.
Go.
Okay. To Gabriel's point, obviously it started in the subsurface, but the North Star vision pretty quickly thereafter from Shell, and I think the forum, was if you created a data platform for just subsurface, you were creating yet another silo. And if you think about the traditional energy value chain, it's subsurface feeds into production, into operations, into facilities, and downstream. And so it made a lot of sense to start in subsurface and have that golden thread. There are plans within the forum. Of course, they're already doing expansion into wells. I know some of you guys in the audience are working on that, moving into production as well. And then there are new energy services, subcommittees in the forum focused on wind, solar, geothermal, hydrogen, and there is a dedicated carbon capture and sequestration subcommittee. They are extremely active. It made a lot of sense for that subcommittee to be active because a lot of the same data types for, impermeable cap reservoirs and other subsurface data types to identify those carbon capture and sequestration sites aligned with the subsurface mission of the initial data platform. So there definitely is a very strong energy transition mission and a North Star to build an inclusive energy data platform, not just something in subsurface. And anything else to comment on that from the vision?
I would add a different perspective on it. I think, so CCS was the obvious place to go, right? Sure. Because subsurface, the work we were doing is very seamless integrates. But what I like about when suddenly wind and solar came to us quickly, very early stages, and talking about can we actually go in that direction, is because different than oil and gas and CCUS in a certain way that we've been doing for so long, then the work on the standardization and the data alignment is one of breaking old silos. They are much more immature, right? So the forum could take a completely different role in terms of setting a way forward that doesn't allow them to get on the mess we got in the first place, right? So I like very much, so initially we were a bit resistant because we wanted to deliver something that was focused on subsurface to get something going, right? And not to branch off too much. But if you think about it, it is the right time to branch off, right? So they are starting. If you do it now, we'll help everybody go forward in a much better way. So I think that mission is becoming ever more obvious, right? That we could use the forum to do something greater and bigger on the energy transition than just not trying to comply afterwards.
Quick follow-up, does that mean that we can assume that you're flexible and open to disruptive new business models in energy, like, I don't know, lithium mining, salt mining, things like that we hear about that are very baby but could be very big?
Yes, and that's the whole point, right? That's the whole idea that if we start bringing completely different businesses that look completely separate today into something that allows them to coexist, to share tools, share workflows, and share data, what is that to like about potentially making new business models out of that, right? We're now seeing this kind of massive renaissance of lithium now coming out of brines. People are talking about storing energy in the subsurface instead of storing CO2, and then we can store hydrogen. You know, the businesses are there. I would love to see that the idea of the OSDU in the marketplace would be a place where new ideas for new businesses would come out of. But if the ecosystem is not there and we only subsurface, then the blinkers are on, right? Then it's not going to happen.
Thank you.
I think a follow-up to that, too, I would say we saw this week a big announcement from Descartes Lab that's building all in on AWS, and what they're fundamentally looking for are new ways to explore for minerals. So digital is not only transforming the way we do energy, but it's also transforming the way we look for minerals which fuel the energy transition. And they're actually using satellite data and other public data sets to explore for new mineral sources. I mean, you mentioned lithium and other things, so that would be another interesting talk to reference too.
Very good. Thank you.
Gabriel, thank you for presenting here today. Quick question. You mentioned at the beginning that you did a big tour to try to select a partner in this, and choices of consulting firms and technology firms and different type of. Why did you choose AWS?
I could talk about it for hours. You know, and you were there, you remember. But I would say, I think it was maybe one spark, one moment on that trip that we saw a lot of companies kind of approached us in different ways. We even sent data ahead of us to say, here's some examples of the data we work with. When we went and sat with AWS, and you guys were really well prepared, you had done a lot of work with our data to try and show what the art of possible would be and everything else. But I think the spark for us that really latched on, especially from where we were coming from. And I know my team was all known technologists, right? Geologists sitting there just still stuck on the vision, not the hard part of doing. Is during one of those conversations, I remember, if you're going to do this, and I can't remember exactly what the topic was, but we said, well, could we also try that? And then you guys said, well, look, with a lot of work, we can do anything. The question is what we want to focus on. So it's this willingness to say, the future doesn't scare us. Let's go and put the right people on it. We have the right brains to do it. Is what kind of changed our minds to say that the attitude is probably more important than what you have behind you, right? It's the attitude of, if we don't know, we'll find out. We're going to go after there. So I think the alignment on the vision, and that we actually are building something that's going to be bigger than the sum of its parts in the future, and the willingness to go try and see what happens, irrespective of the ecosystem, the size, and everything you brought already to the table, was what immediately stood out from everybody else we talked to. Is this willingness to jump into the unknown and say, well, we're going to figure it out together. And your customer obsession meant that, whatever crap we put on the table, you guys said, yes, let's try. And it was brilliant, right? Because then it allowed us to imagine even more. So we felt like we weren't being pulling down by, that's not possible, or that's going to be hard. We never heard that from you guys. What we heard was, let's try. It's going to be difficult, but we're going to do it. Let's try. And that allowed us to continue to push, because we had to push internally as well to get things going. So I think it was the attitude, the culture, the receptiveness was more important than all the great aspects of the AWS that came behind it afterwards.
Thank you.
Bye, and thank you for your presentation. This is Giuseppe from ENI. I'd like to ask you if you can explain a bit better how OSDU platform can improve data governance and governance of processes within your work. Thank you.
Should I go?
Yes, please.
So I don't know how it feels internally to your company today, but I can give you a picture on ours. You know, depending on the data type, we have a very fragmented landscape, right? Sure, people in the audience can keep me honest, but I think if you just look at how many instances of our well repository globally are like 30, 32 or something like that, and they're all slightly different. So they have, of course, local governments in countries that demand us to do something different things. So part of our vision always was that if we centralize our data and put our data in a common data platform, that we're going to have much more visibility of are we actually taking care of our data in the right way, right? When you sign a contract with a partner company, when I operate together with ENI in a block, part of operating together means that we're going to treat our data with the highest standards, right? How can I ensure that if my data is fragmented in a whole bunch of silos? So the vision also was that data governance and clarity of how we're managing our data, how we're ensuring that we are complying with entitlements and obligations, for example, it was going to be always much more visible, much more clear, much more easier to implement if everything else relating to your data is standardized. Then you can do it. Even if I have to differentiate between country A and B, I'm differentiating from a point where everything else is the same. Much easier to do and reconcile afterwards. Data across borders, can I do that? So we always worry that data management for us is a risk, right? Data obligations are a risk, because if I don't have full oversight on my data, do I have an exposure somewhere that I don't know of, right? So OSDU has always been part of our vision that we would allow us to be much more crisp, much more on top of it. And then if you imagine that we are now having workflows that are being orchestrated in a much more transparent way, you know, governance and assurance of process, for example, is the word used, can be much more transparent, right? Not depending on that meeting that has to happen that day, right? So can we use data directly in front of whoever has to provide assurance, or whoever has to sign off that the process is being done correctly, especially if it's, you know, regarding to safety, for example. You can create automation that verifies if the data is being, you know, used in the right way, the right data is being used to derive a certain outcome. So all these ideas of us making ourselves much more nimble by using machine learning on verifying our work or translating what we do already in outputs without having to create unstructured data, for example, are never really possible if your data is siloed, right? If the data is not in the same place. So the idea was, if the data is all in one place and now I change my process, changing the process is just changing the workflow. These days, sometimes you want to change your process, you can't, because your infrastructure is so fragmented that the process can't change. So it was always part of the idea that there would be a second order effect, right? That we could get much more nimble at reviewing our own processes and reviewing our own ways of doing things and assuring how we do it in a very different way. I must say, this is idyllic. We're not there yet, right? But we need to have it going. We need to have it going in more than one part of the overall workflow from discovery to production to really show that it's possible. But it will never be as bad as it is today. That's what I can tell you, at least from my view.
Thank you. And how long do you expect it can take to change the mind of people to get this working effectively?
If I really, really knew, I'll quit and go sell that to someone else. But I'll tell you, I think what I've seen so far with these type of changes, right? As long as we're talking about hypothetically, we could, the cynics are sitting in the room just going, never going to happen, right? And then it doesn't change. For as long as you're telling them, this will come, and then when it comes, we will be able to, we could do this, the cynics are going to look at you and smile and go like, never going to happen. The day that you put in front of them and show, the rest of the team is going to start doing it this way. If you don't like it, you can go back to the old way, but you're going to be alone. You win. And that change happens very quickly. So I don't believe in these ideas that people go through a very long process of change, and especially the ones that are more risk-averse or less prone to the new. The change really happens in moments where you have proof, right? You put things in front of people and say, here you go, it's working. Or that work you did yesterday and the work they feel the same, right? But the background changed completely. You didn't see it happen in the background. So those kind of tangible points, when people feel the difference, it's usually where the change happens. I'll give you an example from a different domain. We've been working a lot with machine learning impacting the way seismic interpretation is done. And we talked a lot about getting to the point that seismic interpretation becomes something done in minutes, not in months sometimes. And everybody had the same attitude of, this is never going to happen. Until we brought Picasso, which is something we developed with Blueware, and put it in front of some of our older, more experienced really cynical to the transformation in front of them and say, look, use it. Tell me that you're going to produce something worse than you did before. And in 2 days, they're asking it to be deployed on every project they're working on. So I think the process of change in this space, especially for OSDU, where we are now, is we've done enough. We just need to get it going, and we need to get the users on it. The biggest problem with getting the users on it is you need not only the data, you need the workflow on top of it, right? Because go from workflows in premise to the cloud and come back, it's not making sense for anybody, right? They're not going to see any change. So to answer your question, from my opinion is I don't think the change of the reticence is going to be very difficult the moment that we actually make it go live and make it really change their view, right? Because I think that's the best benchmark ever, right? They're the customer. They're the ones that need to be impacted by this. If they don't see any change in their lives, it doesn't make any better. Why do I care? Right? But the moment that you put in front of them and say, no, do this and see if it isn't better than what you done yesterday, the change from cynical, never going to work, to a one more happens very quickly.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I'm Nick from ENI as well. So I actually have two questions. First one is if you had anything to share about how the adoption is going of OSDU across the industry. And by that, I mean how companies are using OSDU on production workflows. Mm-hmm. And second question is what are, in your opinion, the current OSDU limits, and how are you going to address them? Thank you.
You want to talk about the adoption?
Sure. Well, I mean, from an adoption standpoint, obviously the membership has gone exponential since it started. There's a lot of active member companies. The majority, about 167 plus or minus on any given month, are application providers. So the majority are application providers or partners, system integrators. The rest are the operators. I would say the adoption is a direct correlation of the feedback that the operators are providing to it. So the more that the operators want to see the seismic domain data management services, they want to see wells on the platform, the more we can upvote that, I think we're going to see more adoption. I would like to see more operators stretch beyond just, of course, the proofs of concepts and the minimum viable products to what we call in Amazon a minimum lovable product. Get a minimum number of features and functionality that you need on seismic or wells and really drive that. And then, don't wait a year, don't wait 5 years, but get something out there quicker. We are looking for more ways to help operators and our application and SI partners scale, as we showed with the energy core services. So we're looking to get creative to solve those problems, but we'll need, of course, your customer feedback, our partner feedback to accelerate that adoption, and the operators are a key piece of that. One of the things that the forum chair constantly reminds everyone is that the platform is for us, by us, meaning for the operators, by the operators. So it's a great function of what you want to see on the platform and getting that accelerated. So we want to help that in 2023.
The second question on the big barrier, I think there are a few things, right, in terms of how the forum kind of it slowed a bit down what we could have done if we were smaller, because now everybody has an opinion, has an input, which is, I like to believe that the result will get better for it. But very specifically, I think the biggest concern I have from a OSDU to continue to grow is how fast can we be ready for a certain data type, right? Because the workflows, whatever workflow you want to deploy on it, demands a certain amount of, a number of data types that are going to be consumed in their workflow or become a part of the outcome. And how quickly can we take that into getting OSDU ready to handle that data type and agree on a standard and make sure that everybody's on board and that's the way we're going to function forward, becomes very quickly a large piece of work. So I think from today, I think the limitation of OSDU growing faster or getting adopted faster is the ability to get more data types ready and acceptable and really standardized going forward. Just for the subsurface ones, I think at some point in time the list was 147.
Right.
And we were trying to get 30, 60 done in a year, and it was already a massive piece of work. So that's the limitation, and that's why we've been trying to get everybody to think about, if we are doing work internally and we also have the work in the forum, can we collaborate on who's doing what where, so we don't duplicate and accelerate things by doing ourselves and donating for. So since we started OSDU, we have donated a whole bunch of work we've done that way in terms of data types we already implemented that we keep donating back to the forum. But I think and going back to Danielle's question, if you think about now even beyond the subsurface workflows we started in the beginning, right, and think about different businesses, different energy forms, it only adds the data type list more and more and more and more. Right? So then how quickly can we go through the data list to make it available is probably the biggest bottleneck, I think, in bringing it forward.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Okay, closing out, I would like to say thank you to Gabriel for your time today and leave you with 3 key themes that we heard from the session. Obviously, if you're an operator, differentiating your workflows. The days of, as Gabriel says, the days of the monolithic software are coming to an end for energy. Operators are wanting to see more of the best-in-breed, differentiated workflows or different applications so that they can really give themselves a competitive advantage. To that end, the second pillar and theme that we heard was finding the right partner. You know, as he mentioned, AWS kind of did what we call that undifferentiated heavy lifting and the infrastructure piece so they could focus on not only their core business, but transforming into new business models. And that third pillar is really not being afraid to devise and develop new business models, as you saw with Studio X and some of the other examples with OSDU. It is a fundamentally different business model, even for our application partners and SI partners in the audience today as well. And so with that, I'd also like to give you an open invitation and a challenge to build with AWS and Studio X, and for those in the energy industry to build on the OSDU Data Platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Appreciate it.